Marcus Chen's hands trembled as he stared at the liquidation papers spread across the mahogany conference table. 18 hours. That's all the time left before TechNova's board of directors would vote to dissolve his father's 30-year empire, scattering 3,000 employees to the Silicon Valley winds. The numbers didn't lie. Revenue down 60%, patent lawsuits bleeding cash, competitors circling like vultures. The quantum computing partnership with Beijing Quantum Industries wasn't just another deal. It was their last breath before drowning. $2 billion would clear every debt and fund the next-generation processors that could revolutionize everything from medical imaging to climate modeling. His phone buzzed against the polished wood. Rebecca's voice cracked through the speaker, barely containing panic. "Sir, Beijing Quantum's delegation just touched down at SFO. ETA 43 minutes. Marcus loosened his silk tie, the one his father had given him the day he'd taken over as CEO. Perfect. Fire up the translation system and make sure, "Sir, we have a catastrophic problem." The words hit him like ice water. Marcus sprinted down the corridor, his Italian leather shoes echoing off the marble floors as he rushed toward the tech center. In 18 months of international negotiations, their Chen Dynamics AI translator had been flawless, processing 17 languages simultaneously, understanding technical jargon that would stump human linguists. It was their secret weapon, the reason they could close deals with companies from Tokyo to Tel Aviv. The tech center's wall of monitors painted Rebecca's face in harsh red light. Error messages cascaded down the screens like digital blood. Error message, cultural context error, emotional variance unrecognized, implicit communication patterns undefined. "When did this start?" Marcus demanded, watching thousands of lines of code scroll past in a blur of incomprehension. 27 minutes ago, the system was running routine diagnostics on Chinese cultural parameters and just collapsed. It's a core algorithm failure, the kind that takes weeks to debug. Marcus felt the walls of his glass office closing in. The Beijing team would expect seamless communication for a deal this complex. Patent licensing, manufacturing protocols, profit-sharing agreements that required precise translation of technical and legal terminology. One misunderstood clause about intellectual property rights could torpedo everything. "Get me every freelance translator in the Bay Area," he barked, loosening his collar as sweat beaded despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. Rebecca's fingers flew across her tablet. "I've tried, sir. Every certified Mandarin translator is booked solid. There's a tech conference in San Jose, 2 IPO roadshows, and apparently half of Stanford's translation department is at a wedding in Napa." The irony wasn't lost on him. Silicon Valley, the supposed epicenter of global communication, and he couldn't find a single person to bridge 2 languages when his company's survival depended on it. His father had built TechNova by being prepared for every contingency, but David Chen never imagined his son would face corporate extinction because a computer couldn't understand the difference between what Chinese executives said and what they meant. Marcus stared at his reflection in the black screen of a dormant monitor. At 34, he looked older than his father had at 40. Stress lines etched around his eyes, gray threading through his black hair. The weight of inheriting an empire built on his father's ruthless business practices had aged him beyond his years. Now, as he faced the possibility of losing everything David Chen had sacrificed to build, Marcus wondered if this was karmic justice finally catching up to the Chen family name. The elevator chimed. 41 minutes until Beijing Quantum Industries arrived to either save his company or witness its death throes. In a building filled with the brightest minds in technology, Marcus Chen had never felt more helpless or alone. The irony of his father's legacy haunted the sterile corridors as Marcus paced outside the tech center. David Chen had built TechNova through calculated aggression, acquiring smaller companies, absorbing their patents, and discarding their founders like yesterday's code. "Business is war," his father had always said, and sentiment is the enemy of profit. Marcus remembered the night in 2019 when David had celebrated the Chen Dynamics acquisition over expensive scotch in this very building. A promising startup developing revolutionary translation algorithms had dared to compete with TechNova's inferior language processing software. Rather than innovate, David Chen had weaponized the legal system, patent disputes, trademark challenges, and frivolous lawsuits that drained the smaller company's resources until bankruptcy was inevitable. "We didn't just buy their technology," David had boasted, swirling amber liquid in his crystal tumbler. "We eliminated future competition and acquired their founder's genius for pennies on the dollar." The acquired neural framework had been genius. In 18 months, it had generated over $40 million in licensing revenue and positioned TechNova as the premier provider of AI translation services for international corporations. Marcus had never questioned the source of their technological advantage, until now, watching that same system fail when he needed it most. "Mr. Chen?" A quiet voice interrupted his spiral of memories. Marcus turned to see Jerome Washington approaching with measured steps, tablet in hand. In the 3 years since Jerome had started working night shifts, Marcus had barely noticed him, just another face in the invisible army of janitors, security guards, and maintenance workers who kept the building functioning while the real business happened during daylight hours. But something was different about Jerome tonight. Instead of pushing a cleaning cart, he carried a high-end tablet displaying streams of diagnostic data. His dark eyes held an intensity that seemed out of place for someone whose job description involved emptying trash cans and mopping floors. Mr. Chen, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Ms. Rebecca. Your AI system is experiencing cascading failures in its cultural interpretation subroutines." Marcus blinked, processing the technical language coming from his night janitor. "Jerome, I appreciate your concern, but this is a bit outside your... The error logs indicate a fundamental flaw in the implicit communication algorithms," he continued, scrolling through data on his tablet with the fluid movements of someone intimately familiar with complex software architectures. "Chinese business negotiations operate on approximately 70% subtext. Your system is trying to translate literal meanings while completely missing the emotional and cultural undertones that determine actual intent." The specificity of Jerome's analysis stopped Marcus cold. This wasn't casual tech knowledge. This was deep, expert-level understanding of the exact problem plaguing their mission-critical system. "How do you know about our system specifications?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jerome's fingers paused over the tablet screen. For a moment, something flickered across his features, pain perhaps, or old anger carefully controlled. When he spoke again, his words carried the weight of buried history. "Because I wrote the original neural framework your AI system is built on." The corridor seemed to contract around them. Marcus felt his carefully constructed worldview tilting off its axis as Jerome continued with quiet authority. "Chen Wu Dynamics. That was my company, my algorithms, my life's work." Jerome's voice remained steady, but Marcus caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "Before your father's legal team made sure I'd never work in tech again." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. The genius behind their most profitable technology, the innovation that had saved TechNova from irrelevance, was standing before him in a janitor's uniform, relegated to cleaning the offices of the company that destroyed his dreams. "I've been watching my own creation fail for 3 years, Jerome said, his gaze holding Marcus's without flinching, "wondering when someone would finally notice the critical flaw I never got the chance to fix." Marcus stared at the man before him, his mind reeling as fragments of his father's victory stories reassembled into a narrative of devastation. The brilliant young entrepreneur who had dared challenge TechNova hadn't simply disappeared into Silicon Valley's graveyard of failed startups. He had been systematically destroyed, then relegated to cleaning the offices of his destroyers. "The patent lawsuit," Marcus whispered, memories crystallizing with sickening clarity. "My father claimed you stole proprietary algorithms from our research division." Jerome's laugh held no humor. "Proprietary algorithms that didn't exist until I created them? Your father's legal team buried me in depositions and discovery requests that cost more to defend against than my entire company was worth. When Chen Wu went bankrupt, TechNova acquired our assets at 8 cents on the dollar." The weight of inherited guilt pressed down on Marcus's shoulders. Every international deal, every licensing agreement, every moment of technological superiority,
all built on the bones of Jerome's murdered dreams. He had always wondered why his father had been so confident about the Chen acquisition, so certain their translation technology would dominate the market. Why didn't you fight back? Sue us? Go public? With what resources? Jerome's voice remained controlled, but Marcus caught the flash of old pain. Your father made sure I was blacklisted from every major tech company in the Valley. Non-disclosure agreements tied up my ability to discuss the technology. By the time I could afford a lawyer capable of taking on TechNova, the statute of limitations had expired, and you'd integrated my code so deeply into your systems that proving ownership became impossible. Marcus felt sick. He had been 28 when the acquisition happened, fresh from Stanford Business School and eager to prove himself worthy of the Chen name. He had celebrated his father's brilliant strategic move without questioning its ethics or legality. "So you took a job here," Marcus said, understanding dawning with horrible clarity, "watching us profit from your work every single day." I needed to eat, and yes, part of me wanted to witness the inevitable failure I knew was coming. The algorithm has a fundamental weakness in processing implicit cultural communications. I was 3 weeks away from solving it when your father's lawyer shut down my lab. Rebecca's voice cut through the tension, echoing from the tech center. "Marcus, 28 minutes until they arrive. The backup systems are still failing diagnostic checks." The countdown clock of corporate survival resumed its relentless tick. Marcus found himself caught between past and present, between his father's sins and his own desperate need. 3,000 employees counted on him, families with mortgages and college tuitions and medical bills, all innocent of David Chen's ruthless ambitions. "You could let us fail. Watch everything my father built crumble. Call it justice." Marcus studied him for a long moment, his dark eyes searching Marcus's face for something. Sincerity, perhaps a genuine remorse. "Your father destroyed my company, stole my work, ended my career." Jerome's voice carried the weight of 3 years of silent observation. "But those 3,000 people in this building didn't make that choice. They're not responsible for what he did to me." The moral complexity of the moment wasn't lost on Marcus. Jerome held all the power now, the knowledge to save TechNova and the justification to let it die. One man's choice would determine whether justice meant punishment or redemption. "I can fix the algorithm," Jerome continued, his fingers moving across the tablet screen to display cascading code structures. "The cultural interpretation matrix needs a complete rewrite, but I can patch the critical vulnerabilities in under 20 minutes, enough to handle tonight's negotiation." Marcus felt hope and shame warring in his chest. "What do you want in return?" Jerome's answer came without hesitation, carrying the weight of 3 years of careful consideration. "I want what your father stole from me. Not just employment, partnership, equity, recognition, a seat at the table where decisions about my technology get made."
The terms hit Marcus like cold water. Jerome wasn't asking for charity or temporary assistance. He was demanding the restoration of what had been taken. Dignity, ownership, control over his own creation. "And if I say no?" Jerome's smile held no malice, only quiet certainty. "Then you'll discover exactly how catastrophic this algorithm failure becomes when Beijing Quantum's negotiation team realizes your AI can't tell the difference between diplomatic courtesy and polite rejection." Marcus looked at his reflection in the darkened windows, seeing not just his own face, but the ghost of his father's legacy. Some inheritances came with a price that could only be paid through the courage to choose differently. The elevator chimed again, and Marcus's blood turned to ice. Rebecca's heels clicked rapidly across the marble floor as she approached with barely contained panic. "They're early," she announced, her voice tight with stress. "Beijing Quantum's advance team just pulled into the parking garage. The main delegation is 5 minutes behind them." Marcus felt the walls of his carefully constructed world collapsing inward. He had imagined having more time to process Jerome's revelation, to weigh the implications of partnering with the man his father had destroyed. Instead, corporate survival was breathing down his neck with the relentless urgency of a ticking bomb. "I need an answer," Jerome said quietly, his finger hovering over the tablet's diagnostic interface. "Once I start the algorithm repair, there's no going back. Either we do this as partners, or you face Beijing Quantum with a broken system and whatever consequences follow." Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus could see black sedans pulling up to TechNova's main entrance. Men in expensive suits emerged, their movements precise and purposeful. Dr. Li Wei, the Beijing Quantum Chief Technology Officer, stepped onto the sidewalk and checked his watch, a man accustomed to punctuality and uncomfortable with anything less than perfection. "Sir," Rebecca's voice cut through his paralysis, "the conference room is ready, but without functional translation." "How do I know you won't sabotage us?" Marcus interrupted, turning back to Jerome. The question tasted bitter in his mouth even as he spoke it, but desperation made cowards of principled men. Jerome's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Not anger, Marcus realized, but profound sadness. "Because," Jerome said, his voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom, "revenge would be letting you discover what failure looks like when you've never faced it before. Revenge would be watching 3,000 innocent people lose their jobs because of your father's sins." He paused, his gaze moving to the arriving delegation visible through the windows. "I've spent 3 years deciding what kind of man I want to be. Not the kind who punishes the innocent for the guilty man's crimes." The moral clarity of Jerome's words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Here was a man who had lost everything, career, company, recognition, yet still chose principle over vengeance. Meanwhile, Marcus was questioning the integrity of the person offering to save him. Rebecca's phone buzzed. "Main delegation just entered the lobby. 2 minutes until they reach the executive floor." Marcus watched Jerome's fingers move across the tablet screen, displaying lines of elegant code that could either save or doom TechNova. The algorithm structures were beautiful in their complexity, the work of a true innovator, not just a competent programmer. "Your father never understood the difference between winning and succeeding," Jerome said, his attention split between Marcus and the diagnostic data. "Winning is temporary. Success builds something lasting, something that lifts others up instead of tearing them down."
The elevator mechanism whirred to life somewhere in the building's core. In 90 seconds, Beijing Quantum's delegation would step onto the executive floor, expecting flawless communication and professional competence. They would find either a CEO who had learned to value partnership over pride, or a company collapsing under the weight of its founder's moral compromises. Marcus thought about his father's framed photograph in the boardroom. David Chen's confident smile frozen in time, commemorating a man who had built an empire through calculated destruction. Then he looked at Jerome Washington, whose quiet dignity and technical brilliance had survived 3 years of invisible servitude. The choice crystallized with stunning clarity. This wasn't just about saving TechNova or securing the Beijing Quantum deal, it was about choosing which legacy he wanted to inherit. His father's ruthless pragmatism or something entirely different. "Equal partnership," Marcus said, extending his hand. "Full equity stake. Your name on the door." Jerome's smile was small but genuine as he shook Marcus's hand and began typing rapidly on his tablet. "Then let's save your company." Jerome's fingers moved across the tablet with the fluid precision of a concert pianist, lines of code cascading across the screen as he rewrote 3 years of accumulated errors. The cultural interpretation matrix was corrupted by recursive feedback loops. Your system kept trying to translate subtext literally instead of understanding emotional context. Chinese executives might say, "Your proposal has interesting elements," when they mean, "This is completely unacceptable." The algorithm was hearing approval instead of polite rejection. Rebecca appeared at Marcus's shoulder, her face pale with stress. "They're in the elevator. 30 seconds. Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs, but Jerome's composure remained unshakable. The man who had spent 3 years emptying trash cans was now conducting a symphony of artificial intelligence with the confidence of someone reclaiming his natural element. "Testing cultural parameter recognition," Jerome murmured, his eyes never leaving the screen. "Implicit communication protocols online.
Emotional variance mapping, calibrated. Contextual hierarchy analysis. He paused, fingers hovering over the final command sequence. Perfect. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and Marcus heard voices speaking rapid Mandarin echoing down the corridor. Dr. Li Wei's distinctive laugh, the sound of a man comfortable with his own importance, carried clearly through the marble hallways. Your system is now functioning at optimal capacity, Jerome said, closing the tablet and straightening his shoulders. For the first time since their conversation began, Marcus truly saw the man standing before him, not a janitor who happened to understand technology, but a brilliant engineer who had been temporarily relegated to menial labor. I should change, Jerome said, glancing down at his uniform. First impressions matter in Chinese business culture. No, Marcus surprised himself with the firmness of his response. You've already made the most important change. Everything else is just clothing. They walked together towards the conference room, past the awards and patents lining TechNova's walls, achievements that now felt hollow given their tainted origins. Marcus found himself seeing his company through new eyes, recognizing how much of their success had been built on other people's stolen dreams. Dr. Li Wei rounded the corner with his delegation of 5 executives, their movements synchronized with the precision of a well-rehearsed ballet. Marcus stepped forward to greet them, but Dr. Li's attention immediately shifted to Jerome, his experienced eyes recognizing technical competence regardless of uniform. Dr. Li, welcome to TechNova, Marcus began in English, then gestured towards Jerome. I'd like you to meet Jerome Washington, my partner and the architect of our translation technology.
Dr. Li's eyebrows rose slightly, not at Jerome's appearance, but at Marcus's use of the word partner. In Chinese business culture, titles and relationships carried enormous significance. Marcus had just announced that Jerome held equal standing in this negotiation. Jerome stepped forward and spoke in flawless Mandarin, his tone carrying the precise formality required for such introductions. Dr. Li's expression shifted from polite interest to genuine surprise as Jerome continued, discussing technical specifications and cultural protocols with the fluency of someone who had lived and worked in China. 您的中文说得很好, Dr. Li replied in Mandarin, then switched to English. Your Chinese is excellent, Mr. Washington. Where did you study? Fudan University. I spent 12 years in Shanghai before returning to the United States. Marcus watched the dynamic in the room shift as Dr. Li and his team began treating Jerome not as a translator, but as a technical equal. Questions about quantum processing algorithms and patent licensing flowed naturally between Jerome and the Beijing delegation, while Marcus found himself learning about his own company's technology from the man who had created it. Shall we begin the formal presentation? Dr. Li suggested, but his eyes remained on Jerome. In the space of 5 minutes, the power structure of the negotiation had fundamentally changed. As they moved toward the conference room, Marcus realized he was witnessing something remarkable, not just the salvation of his company, but the restoration of a brilliant mind to its rightful place. Jerome Washington had spent 3 years in exile, but he had never stopped being exactly who he was meant to be. The mahogany conference table gleamed under crystal chandeliers as both delegations took their seats. Marcus occupied his usual position at the head of the table, but the real center of gravity had shifted to Jerome, who sat with the quiet confidence of someone finally operating in his natural environment. Dr. Li Wei opened his leather portfolio and extracted a tablet displaying Beijing Quantum's preliminary terms. Mr. Chen, we appreciate TechNova's interest in our quantum processing initiative. However, our technical review has raised concerns about your translation technology's ability to handle the complexities of our joint research protocols. Marcus felt his chest tighten. Beijing Quantum had clearly done their homework, identifying the exact weakness that had nearly destroyed tonight's meeting. Without Jerome's intervention, this conversation would have been over before it began. Dr. Li raises valid concerns, Jerome interjected smoothly in Mandarin, then switched to English for Marcus's benefit. The previous algorithm iterations did struggle with implicit cultural communications. However, the technology has undergone significant architectural improvements. Jerome activated the wall-mounted display system, and Marcus watched in amazement as his partner, his actual partner now, not just in desperation but in practice, began demonstrating capabilities that Marcus had never known existed within their own systems. The enhanced cultural interpretation matrix can now process 17 different types of diplomatic subtext, Jerome explained, his presentation flowing seamlessly between technical specifications and practical applications. For instance, when a Chinese executive expresses cautious optimism about a proposal, the system recognizes this as preliminary approval contingent on further negotiation, not ambivalence. Dr. Li's team exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from skeptical to genuinely intrigued. Marcus realized he was witnessing something unprecedented, a technical presentation where the presenter understood both the technology and the cultural context better than anyone else in the room. Impressive, Dr. Li acknowledged, but our partnership will require more than translation accuracy. We need guarantees about intellectual property protection, manufacturing protocols, and profit distribution. These negotiations will involve sensitive discussions about quantum encryption methods that cannot afford miscommunication. Jerome leaned forward, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had navigated these exact challenges before. Dr. Li, with respect, technical excellence without cultural trust is worthless. Beijing Quantum isn't just evaluating TechNova's translation capabilities, you're determining whether we understand the deeper principles that make Chinese-American partnerships succeed.
The room fell silent. Marcus held his breath, recognizing that Jerome had just reframed the entire negotiation from a simple technology demonstration to a fundamental question of mutual respect and understanding. "You speak as someone with experience," Dr. Li observed, his tone carefully neutral. 12 years in Shanghai taught me that successful international partnerships require more than accurate translations, Jerome replied. They require partners who understand that preserving face while achieving mutual benefit is an art form, not an algorithm. Dr. Li smiled, the first genuine expression Marcus had seen from him all evening. And what does preserving face look like in the context of a $2 billion quantum computing partnership? Jerome's answer came without hesitation, recognizing that Beijing Quantum's concerns about our technology aren't criticisms to defend against, but opportunities to demonstrate that TechNova has evolved beyond its previous limitations. Marcus watched, mesmerized as Jerome continued. "Your technical review identified real weaknesses in our translation systems. Rather than dismissing those concerns, we've used them as catalysts for innovation. The algorithm improvements I've demonstrated tonight weren't developed in response to this meeting. They represent 3 years of careful observation and refinement." Dr. Li's expression shifted again, this time to something approaching respect. 3 years of refinement suggests a long-term vision rather than desperate improvisation. Exactly, Jerome confirmed. TechNova's commitment to this partnership extends far beyond tonight's contract signing. We're proposing a collaboration that grows stronger through honest feedback and continuous improvement. Marcus felt a mixture of admiration and humility watching Jerome work. This wasn't just technical expertise or cultural fluency. This was leadership at its finest. Jerome had transformed a defensive negotiation into a collaborative conversation about shared values and mutual growth. Dr. Li closed his tablet and looked directly at Jerome. "Mr. Washington, your presentation demonstrates capabilities that extend far beyond translation services. Beijing Quantum has been searching for a North American partner who understands both technological innovation and cross-cultural collaboration." Marcus felt the conversation shifting into uncharted territory. This was no longer about licensing TechNova's translation algorithms or securing a simple manufacturing agreement. Dr. Li was evaluating Jerome for something much larger. "Our quantum encryption project requires a level of cultural intelligence that pure technology cannot provide. We need partners who can navigate the complex relationship between Chinese state enterprises and American private corporations. Someone who understands that successful partnerships in our industry depend on trust building that transcends quarterly profit reports." Jerome leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. Marcus realized his partner was processing not just the technical implications of Dr. Li's words, but the political and cultural complexities embedded within them. "Dr. Li, you're describing challenges that require more than consulting or project management. You're talking about building institutional relationships that can survive changes in trade policy, regulatory environments, and political leadership."
Precisely. Dr. Li's smile carried the satisfaction of someone whose deeper message had been understood. Beijing Quantum Industries is prepared to offer TechNova a comprehensive partnership that includes manufacturing licensing, joint research initiatives, and shared intellectual property development. However, we have one additional proposal. Marcus's pulse quickened as Dr. Li opened a second portfolio and extracted documents bearing official seals and ribbons, the kind of paperwork that indicated governmental approval and substantial financial backing. "We would like Mr. Washington to establish and lead Beijing Quantum's new North American Advanced Research Division," Dr. Li announced. "Full executive authority, equity partnership, and a mandate to develop the next generation of quantum-enhanced artificial intelligence systems. The words hung in the air like suspended lightning. Marcus stared at Jerome, watching his partner's carefully controlled expression as the magnitude of the offer sank in. This wasn't just career rehabilitation. This was elevation to a position of international significance, heading a division that would likely shape the future of AI development. The proposed compensation package reflects the strategic importance of this role, Dr. Lee continued, sliding a sealed envelope across the mahogany table toward Jerome. Beijing Quantum's board has authorized terms that we believe appropriately value your unique combination of technical expertise and cultural competency. Jerome picked up the envelope but didn't open it immediately. Marcus found himself holding his breath, understanding that whatever numbers were written on that paper would fundamentally alter the power dynamics of their newly formed partnership. Dr. Lee, I'm honored by Beijing Quantum's confidence, Jerome said. However, any decision I make about my professional future must consider my existing commitments and partnerships. Marcus felt a strange mixture of pride and terror. Jerome was handling the offer with diplomatic grace, but the underlying reality was unavoidable. Beijing Quantum was offering Jerome resources and recognition that TechNova could never match. Of course, Dr. Lee acknowledged. We understand that significant career transitions require careful consideration. However, I should mention that Beijing Quantum's timeline for this initiative is quite aggressive. We hope to have leadership in place within 60 days. The ultimatum was delivered with perfect politeness, but its implications were crystal clear. Jerome could continue as Marcus's partner in a struggling Silicon Valley company, or accept leadership of a well-funded international research division with virtually unlimited resources. Marcus watched Jerome's face, searching for any indication of his partner's thoughts. 3 hours ago, Jerome had been emptying wastebaskets and mopping floors. Now he held an offer that would make him one of the most influential technologists in the quantum computing industry. Gentlemen, Jerome said, his voice steady despite the enormity of the moment, I believe we should focus on finalizing tonight's primary partnership agreement before discussing additional opportunities. Success in one collaboration often creates the foundation for expanded relationships. Dr. Lee nodded approvingly. Wisdom often lies in completing one's current commitments before embracing new possibilities. But Marcus could see the future crystallizing with painful clarity. Jerome Washington would not remain his partner for long. Part 8. The contract signing took place in the soft glow of the conference room's crystal chandeliers, each signature binding TechNova and Beijing Quantum in a partnership that would have been impossible just hours earlier. Marcus watched Jerome navigate the final technical specifications with effortless expertise, transforming complex manufacturing protocols into clear language that protected both companies' interests. As Dr. Lee's team packed their documents, Marcus found himself studying Jerome's unopened envelope, the career offer that could elevate his partner to heights that TechNova could never reach. The numbers inside represented not only compensation, but recognition, restoration, and the kind of professional validation that 3 years of invisible labor had denied him.
Dr. Lee, Jerome said as the Beijing delegation prepared to leave, I appreciate Beijing Quantum's confidence in my abilities. Might I have 30 days to provide you with a comprehensive response to your leadership proposal? Of course, Dr. Lee replied, though Marcus caught the slight tightening around his eyes. In international business, delays often signal disinterest. We look forward to your decision. The elevator doors closed on Beijing Quantum's team, leaving Marcus and Jerome alone in the sudden quiet of the empty corridor. The weight of the evening's revelations seemed to press down on both men. The partnership forged in crisis, the historic deals secured, and the looming choice that would determine their future. You should take it, Marcus said quietly, surprising himself with the words. Beijing Quantum's offer. It's everything you deserve, everything my father stole from you. Jerome leaned against the marble wall, exhaustion finally showing in his shoulders after hours of diplomatic performance. Is that what you think this is about? Revenge? Getting back what was taken? Isn't it? Marcus asked, You have the chance to lead a division with unlimited resources, international recognition, equity worth more than TechNova's entire market value. Why would you stay here?" Jerome was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving across the awards and patents lining TechNova's walls, achievements that now felt different, knowing their true origin. "3 years ago, I lost everything because I believed that brilliant technology would automatically lead to business success. I was wrong. Technical excellence without ethical leadership is just expensive failure waiting to happen." Marcus felt the weight of his father's legacy pressing on his shoulders. "You're saying I'm not ethical leadership? I'm saying you have the choice to become it." Jerome's voice carried quiet conviction. "Tonight, you chose partnership over pride. You gave me equity instead of employment. You let me lead instead of trying to control me. That's not the David Chen I remember from the patent lawsuits." The comparison stung, but Marcus recognized its truth. His father would have found a way to use Jerome's expertise while maintaining complete dominance, extracting value while offering minimal recognition. "But Beijing Quantum can offer you resources I never could. Funding, research facilities, international platforms. You could change the entire industry." Jerome smiled, but there was sadness in it. "Marcus, I spent 12 years in China building relationships that your father destroyed in 18 months of legal warfare. I know exactly what Beijing Quantum's offer represents and what it costs." "What do you mean?" "Chinese state enterprises don't offer partnerships. They offer golden handcuffs. I would have resources, yes, but every decision would require approval from committees in Beijing. Every innovation would serve political objectives I might not share." He paused, his expression growing serious. "I'd be trading one form of invisible servitude for another, just with better compensation." Marcus felt something shift in his understanding. Jerome wasn't just choosing between companies, he was choosing between different definitions of freedom. "What are you proposing?" "Something neither my father nor Beijing Quantum ever considered. A partnership based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. We build TechNova into something that proves ethical leadership and technological innovation can coexist." Jerome opened the sealed envelope and showed Marcus the numbers inside. Even in the corridor's dim lighting, the figures were staggering. More money than Marcus had ever seen offered for any position in Silicon Valley. "This represents 3 years of stolen recognition," Jerome said, then carefully folded the offer and placed it in his jacket pocket. "But building something meaningful with you represents the next 30 years of my career. I'd rather invest in relationships that grow stronger over time than accept compensation for ones that were broken." Marcus stared at his partner, his actual partner, who was choosing loyalty over opportunity, principle over profit. For the first time since inheriting his father's company, Marcus felt the possibility of building something he could be genuinely proud of. "Equal partners," Marcus said, extending his hand, "in everything. Technology, decisions, profits, and responsibility." Jerome's handshake was firm and final. "Then let's build something worth choosing."
6 months later, Marcus stood in the renovated lobby of TechNova Industries, watching the morning sun illuminate the new company directory. Marcus Chen, CEO, and Jerome Washington, Chief Technology Officer and co-founder, were etched in matching bronze plaques, equal billing that would have been unthinkable in his father's era. The transformation hadn't been merely cosmetic. TechNova's revolutionary human-AI collaboration model had attracted global attention, with Fortune 500 companies requesting consultations on integrating cultural intelligence with artificial intelligence. The Beijing Quantum partnership had exceeded all projections, generating not just revenue, but industry recognition for ethical innovation. "Mr. Chen?" A young woman approached with nervous energy. Sarah Martinez, a recent Stanford graduate interviewing for their new ethical technology development program. I wanted to thank you for creating this position. Most companies talk about responsible AI, but TechNova is actually building it. Marcus smiled, remembering his own naive confidence at her age. The real architect of our approach is in Conference Room B, Jerome Washington. He's interviewing candidates for our cultural interpretation research team. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see Jerome leading a discussion with 6 doctoral candidates from diverse backgrounds: computer scientists from India, linguists from Nigeria, cultural anthropologists from Brazil. The scene represented everything TechNova had become, a place where different perspectives weren't just tolerated, but actively cultivated. The morning briefing in Marcus's office had revealed remarkable statistics. Employee satisfaction scores had increased 40%. Patent applications, genuinely innovative ones, not defensive filings, had tripled. Most significantly, TechNova's new hiring practices had attracted talent that would have been overlooked by traditional Silicon Valley recruiting methods. Jerome was right about invisible brilliance, Marcus reflected to Rebecca, who had evolved from panic-prone assistant to strategic operations director. We were surrounded by exceptional people we never bothered to see. Rebecca nodded towards the lobby's digital display showcasing employee achievements. The custodial staff includes 2 former engineers from Venezuela, a displaced Syrian architect, and a retired mathematics professor from Ethiopia. Our security team leader has an MBA from Lagos Business School. Marcus felt humbled by the revelation of hidden expertise throughout our organization. Jerome's transformation from janitor to co-founder had inspired company-wide recognition that circumstances didn't define capability. TechNova now operated internal education programs, English language support, and career advancement pathways that honored every employee's potential.
The impact extended beyond corporate walls. Marcus had become a sought-after speaker at business schools, sharing the story of how partnership had proven more powerful than domination. His presentations weren't about technological innovation, but about human dignity, how recognizing worth in unexpected places could transform entire organizations. The Chen legacy is being rewritten, Jerome had observed during their weekly partnership meeting. Your father built an empire through acquisition and intimidation. You're building something that lifts people up instead of tearing them down. That afternoon, Marcus joined Jerome in the conference room where Beijing Quantum's Dr. Li was video conferencing from Shanghai. Their partnership had evolved into something unprecedented, a genuine collaboration between Chinese state enterprise and American private corporation that prioritized mutual benefit over zero-sum competition. TechNova's model is attracting attention from our European partners, Dr. Li reported. They want to understand how cultural intelligence can be systematically developed rather than accidentally discovered. Jerome leaned forward, his expertise now globally recognized. Cultural intelligence isn't a talent you're born with. It's a skill developed through genuine curiosity about other people's perspectives. The technology is just the tool. The real innovation is creating environments where people feel safe to share their authentic knowledge. After the call ended, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey from crisis to transformation. The company that had nearly died from technological failure was now leading conversations about humanizing artificial intelligence. Any regrets? Marcus asked Jerome as they walked through the research floor where diverse teams collaborated on projects that would have been impossible 6 months earlier. Jerome's laugh was warm and genuine. About turning down Beijing Quantum's offer? Never. They offered me the chance to be important. You offered me the chance to be meaningful. The distinction resonated deeply with Marcus. Importance was about position and recognition. Meaning was about impact and legacy. TechNova had become meaningful by proving that business success and ethical leadership weren't contradictory, but complementary. As evening settled over Silicon Valley, Marcus watched the last employees leaving for the day. Engineers and custodians, executives and security guards, all departing with the dignity of people whose contributions were valued and recognized. The building that once symbolized his father's ruthless ambition now represented something entirely different. Proof that redemption was possible, that inherited mistakes could be transformed into conscious choices, and that true partnership could create value that transcended profit. In the quiet of his office, Marcus opened his laptop and began typing the opening lines of the memoir he'd been encouraged to write. The most important business lesson I ever learned came from a man I almost overlooked, and it had nothing to do with technology. Some legacies are inherited, others are consciously chosen and carefully built.